So, let me see. Questions. Keep it light. DC or Marvel? Or vegan?
I definitely have to go with DC. Actually, no, you know what? I'm going to go Marvel just because I'm such a huge Iron Man fan. Obviously, I have favorites in both, but it just depends.
There we go.
So, yeah, it just depends. But I do have a big fandom for Iron Man, so probably Marvel on that.
You fancy yourself as a Tony Stark?
I would just like to say that I relate a little bit more to him because he's kind of like that tragic hero who is sometimes makes the hard decisions and he's not always liked, and he doesn't care too much about being liked. He's not always trying to be upstanding. He's trying to do the right thing, and sometimes that's hard.
You're Marvel.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. We've had side little conversations before in passing, so I've been really kind of looking forward to this.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Garret, please introduce yourself to everybody.
Sure. Name's Garret Orien. I am a personal trainer here at UFC Gym. I've been living here in Hawaii for about 4 years. I've been a personal trainer for 8 years. My specialization, or I guess I could say area of interest, is nutrition. Anything and everything nutrition. I got into that because I personally had a lot of gut issues growing up, and that made having a normal life really difficult. I didn't go out. I didn't have a social life. And so all I cared about was getting better. So all I did is I spent my free time researching, learning about nutrition, trying to figure out ways to get myself healthy so that I could have, a normal life. And through that, I just became super passionate about it and realized that lots of people are having problems and lots of people need help, but there's so much information out in the world that is A, hard to understand, or B, it's just it's not made, we're not made aware of it. And so I decided that it would be a worthwhile life to live to go out there, collect this information, and then try to bring it back to people in an easy, simple to understand form.
Yeah. For the record, by the way, excellent nutrition seminar you did for the coaches earlier.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that.
There was parts of me that I really wish that we almost just recorded parts of it, because there's a lot of good general knowledge. But I think there's so much more that you could probably share and do a way deeper dive into it.
Right.
And we'll revisit some of those things inside this conversation for sure.
Definitely.
So yeah, let's start off with let me ask you a few athletic backgrounds. What did you do any sports when you were younger as well, or?
Yeah. So I was actually growing up really unathletic kid, not only because of the digestive issues, but just because that's I grew awkward. My legs one grew faster than the other, and I had a very low pain tolerance, and my joints kind of always hurt. So it was not, I never really played with other kids as a little one, so I didn't develop the cardio that most of the other kids had. I was still running a 12.5-minute mile as a junior in high school, so very, very slow, not athletic at all.
Actually, it sounds like my time.
My parents, right, yeah. My parents did require all of the kids to play or participate in an extracurricular activity. So, growing up I did soccer and baseball and, all that little stuff that you do as a kid. When I got into high school, I had already been in band, from middle school, which I really loved, but I wanted to play a sport, and the sport that made the most sense for me, given what I just described to you, was golf. And my dad golfed a lot, and so that was something that we shared, and he kind of imparted onto me. So I was on the golf team, and I was actually really good at it. I became the varsity captain as a sophomore.
Nice.
So I was pretty competitive, and it was a lot of fun, and I kind of became obsessed towards the end, senior year. I got to the point where I was working at 2 different golf courses, and I was playing 5, 6 rounds a week, as much as I could get my hands on, plus hitting tons of balls. and I got to the point where I was playing in competitions, but I did not have that natural skill. I worked really hard and I got good at it, but there were some people who were just kind of naturally better at it than me, and so it wasn't something that I saw myself doing long term, and so I kind of cut my losses at that point. I also walked on to, at that point I was a little bit more athletic because I had started exercising around sophomore year. I got picked on a lot as a kid, so my dad, forced me, said, "You're going to the gym, I want to make sure you protect yourself." And I hated working out, man. I didn't like being uncomfortable. I didn't like how weak I was. Like, I just hated being.
Interesting. Who was kind of coming up? Was it your dad was helping you with your workout routines and stuff?
Very basic stuff. Like, so he's an old school military guy, so like kind of just gave me some foundational stuff. Not the best in terms of form and all that, but like, he got me started. And then there was another guy who worked out at the gym named Lance, and he was like kind of a bigger dude, and I did a couple of workouts with him to kind of show me the ropes. I didn't get a lot of good form correction, unfortunately, and I did do a lot of damage to my knees at the time, just, with improper form. But hindsight's 20/20, so. But what was very attractive to me about it after a while was it was the first time I had seen some change in my body. So, like, I saw my muscles get bigger, and I saw that I was getting stronger, and I was like, that was super addictive feeling, because that's something that I had always wanted, but I was under the impression that it was impossible. Like, that's just not it for somebody like me.
Let's kind of dive back into like the social aspects of athletics,
Okay.
because there's a few things that I think that, like, I think I was playing sports. My mom put me into sports when I was like 4 or 5, and I can't even say that I have fond memories of it.
Right.
Like, the memories I remember is like me always sitting on the bench, and then I would take like these chalk rocks and I'd be drawing on the ground the entire time.
Right.
Like, I had
Not really interested.
yeah, but my mom was a really good soldier about just as like, it's after school, you're going to, every day was going over to pull apart. It sounds like in a similar way, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what you call it, like your dad sounds like he was a good disciplinarian.
Yes.
He was. He taught a lot of he was trying to teach a good mindset to get into it, and I think that's very important. And the reason why I brought up my experience with basketball and your experience with the weight room is like, I really didn't want to be there.
Right.
And while I never really got into basketball ever again, it was that athletic mindset that started building up. And to me, I find that very important, because I think that's one of those things as a trainer. Like, we could talk science all day. Like, exactly how much protein somebody needs to gain muscle mass, and what's the other combinations of supplements and body stress that you need to put on. But if the person doesn't wanna, then that's not a pill that we sell yet.
Right. Right.
Or probably will ever. What was kind of now you were mentioning the weightlifting, and I kind of wanted to double back to the golf thing, because that, in my experience, is not as popular as a sport, especially at like the high school level.
Right.
So what was kind of some of your bites on that? Like, what was...
Well, so golf, it's something that I had done with my dad since I was very little. Like, when I was young, he would take me to the driving range with him, and I had a little, mini set of golf clubs as a kid. But I think what was great was that I wanted to compete, like, I wanted to make my dad proud. I wanted other kids to see that I wasn't just like, this useless blob. And so golf was a way for me to compete. Now, granted, it wasn't super popular, and it's not like we had cheerleaders or anything like that. Like, it was pretty much just the people who were playing it that were there, and the coaches. But to get some positive feedback from the coaches and from other players from different schools when I would do well and around was really instrumental to me, like, kind of building up some confidence and feeling accomplished, because there wasn't a lot of that feeling when I was growing up. So, like, that was a big deal for me. And then also it was one of those things, because once I did start working out, then I became known as like a long knocker. Basically, I hit the ball really far.
Oh, interesting.
And that was like really like kind of, it was good to be able to do something that other people could. You know what I mean? Because for for my whole life, I had been watching other people do things that I couldn't, whether it was running down a fly ball or baseball or, making a certain amount of goals in a soccer game. I was always the one who was just not good at it. And so when I developed this reputation in my school district of being a kid who hit the ball the farthest, like it, felt really good because I was like, finally got some. But yeah, I think it was just one of those things where it was a small piece of the whole puzzle. There was a lot of things going on at the time. It was also kind of like an escape from everything because there was a lot of complicated, social stuff going on both at school and at home at the time. And so the gym, once I turned 16, and then golf was like, I'm away from that. I could just go focus on something else. So it was therapy, both physically and psychologically. So.
Now, could I assume, since I brought up the Marvel stuff, that you were maybe a little bit more on the introverted side?
Actually, no.
Really? Okay.
I mean, I was a strange kid for sure. I wasn't good at picking up social cues, but I was very loud. So I was not afraid to make a fool of myself over and over and over again to try to get attention. So I tried, I wore a bunch of different outfits in different styles, trying to fit in with my niche, and I always answering questions in class, and I was just every chance that I got to talk, I wanted attention for sure. But that being said, with how I acted and who I was at the time, the attention I usually got wasn't always the most positive. So kind of a dichotomy there.
Well, for sure.
Two ideas.
What did they always say? Negative marketing is still marketing.
Right. No. There's no bad press.
There's no bad press. I think, and that's a very interesting thing from our perspective, because I think Coach Confessionary, for the record out there, people, and this isn't anything that I haven't said in previous videos. There's a lot of stuff that when you become a fitness coach and you become an authority for health and fitness, and you're working with people that don't know what they don't know.
Right.
But I think, especially in this day and age with the internet and social media and stuff, now it becomes this I know how should I say? There's this false, I'll call it the fake news, this whole idea of no, I know what I'm talking about. Right? And there's almost this immediate pushback on trying to, okay, look, I'm just speaking from the science.
Right.
I'm being about as legitimate as I can, but you already have these walls that you got to break through.
What's interesting about that is that before being a trainer, during being a trainer, for a significant amount of time, I was one of those people who would form very hard opinions. When I was really sick with my digestive issues, which I'm sure we can talk about later, I was trying all these different diets, and one of them was veganism. And for a while, I totally fell into the vegan propaganda of, red meat is bad for you, and animal products are poison, and I was totally convinced. But that happened for a lot of I would guess you could call them ideologies or ideas that kind of gripped me at the time. And basically what would happen is that I would fall into that belief. I would hold steadfast in it for a while, and then either situationally, I would be put into some type of situation where I would be proven wrong, or just the facts, because one thing that remained constant was I was always trying to learn more. And so at first, if I fell into an idea, I would just read everything that confirmed that idea, but inevitably I would start to read everything about the subject, and then once you start to get all the facts, you get a better picture. And so that is true for everything for me. For religion, for diets, for training, for relationships. I'm a very strong-willed person in that I get a really strong opinion, and then, whether it's a couple months or a year later or however long it was, I would just be you know what, I'm not sure I believe that anymore, And I'm really thankful for that. I really am, and part of that was learning the skill of having to admit when I'm wrong, which is rough, man. You've never done it before. Now it's easy. Now I'm almost too quick to admit. I'm I don't know. But it's if you're used to being right, or you like to be right, which I did a lot as a kid, it's very hard to overcome that barrier of saying hey, you know what? I fucked up. Like I did not, I didn't mean to say those things, but I did, and I don't mean that anymore, and I'm sorry. So.
I think that's always a very interesting equation on that side of it. I completely relate to you on that side. I always remember, I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson that says, know enough of something that you can speak to it, but be humble about it enough that you don't close your mind to other interpretations.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So, and in many ways, I think part of what this podcast symbolizes is keeping that open lines of communication open. In my opinion, I feel that people are very polarized in all these different directions, and it can be either Team A or Team B. I think it was Matt Taibbi that was even talking about how that has been the media equation. Just stick to your camp and feed those specific people exactly what they want to hear. And me as a person, like especially when you're younger, it's like, yeah, this is what I heard, this is what it's going to be. Let me kind of double back, and I want to share experience because I think you said you used to work at GNC, right?
NutriShop. Yeah.
Well, it was a light GNC.
Right, pretty much the same thing, yeah.
Because I remember GNC was like the king of the game and the supplements back in like the 90s or so, and that correlates with the what was the law that was passed around that time? I want to say it was the law that basically deregulated the supplement industry and took like the FDA out of, was it DAPCA or?
Honestly, I couldn't remember.
You know what I'm talking
but
about.
But I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? So that was a big deal because basically that meant that anybody could get in the supplement game without having to go through the strict regulatory processes of the FDA. And then, it was like companies just started popping up left and right, like, oh, try our supplements, this brand, that brand. And basically it's just like the store shelves were flooded with this whole new explosion of products.
Yeah. And I, as a high school kid, I bought a lot of that hook, line, and sinker.
Me too. Yep.
Because you got to remember that was this is the '90s. That was the era of some of the golden age of bodybuilding. Right.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about fitness, you talk about going to a gym. You expected to just see massive dudes.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad having like all these Flex Wheeler like magazines and pumping iron and all these things, and I'm like, holy crap, where are these mutant
monsters? Right?
Yeah,
I wanted to be one of those. So like once I started,
we all did
at
the time.
Yeah, right. When I was 17, and I finally saw some muscle gain, I'm like, I want to be giant. Like I just want to be fucking jacked as possible. And ultimately that led me at 19 to do my first steroid cycle because I was so convinced that I wanted to be big like that. But, not having all the facts, making a rash decision as a young person and not knowing the health consequences or, thinking I'm invincible and then, nothing's going to ever hurt me. So, yeah, that was definitely, obviously I'm a lot more well-rounded now and I have no desire to compete in the Olympia, but it was definitely something that was super attractive at that time even when I was young, it was still like a big...
Yeah, but there was that really strong correlation. You got this marketing want, and they hype this whole thing up, and it's like, hey, you gotta be like 100 pounds heavier muscle, and you gotta get your body fat down into like single digits.
Well, they would take these guys who've been, heavy steroid users for however many years, and they would slap them on an ad with a picture of their protein products. It's basically saying like, hey, if you take a protein, it'll look like this. And it got a lot of people, you know what I mean? It's like, wow, like, yeah, I really want to, like, this is going to
so much so that I think, this doesn't exist, but here's a little history lesson. There was, you'd go to GNC and there were certain things that's like, this is the Russian formula.
Right.
And it was almost a bragging right to be able to say, it's like, this could get you popped.
Yeah.
It's illegal-ish.
Yeah, right.
Right. And the more illegal-ish, then it was better. I remember, and this is like, I know we were talking about crap stories earlier
right.
before, but there was this time in high school, I think it was like a Twin Labs shake. It was like Twin Labs 10,000. Why was it 10,000? Because it was like 10,000 calories in a single serving.
Right.
And that was my breakfast every morning. And I remember, driving up to town and just downing the shake. And somewhere around 10 o'clock in the morning, it wanted to exodus my body fastest way possible. And it was like, oh, I guess this is what it's like to be healthy, is just to lose all your internal organs at 10 o'clock in the morning on the toilet. Kind of speak to like some of the things that you saw in the evolution of like being in that industry, at least from the nutrition side of it.
I think what was crazy was that, like I came into the industry very ignorant, and having a lot of faith in supplements. And not to say that I don't anymore, it's just obviously I'm a little bit more well-tempered about what is reality versus what is just marketing. I got a job at NutriShop because I was working out at the local gym, 24-hour fitness. It was right across the street. I wanted to take supplements to get big, and it was a good way for me to like make connections with people at the time and get clients. I was training at 24-hour fitness, so working those two jobs was kind of like hand in hand with each other. So when I first started out, it was just very like bodybuilding style, basic. Like when I would write meal plans, chicken, fish, broccoli, potatoes, brown rice, like old school.
The old school staples of how you put it together.
Simple,
right.
Like this is what you need, and I would sell people on, protein powder, amino acids, and then depending on what they were doing would be like fat burner, testosterone booster, creatine, whatever it was. So I was always trying to have like that at least three steps per person. And it was very much a business, so it's like there was brands that we carried that were not NutriShop brands, and there was brands that we carried that were. And so like obviously our boss wanted us to sell mainly the NutriShop brands, and so it's like it was always a push for those. But if we can't get them to get those, then let's dial it back and at least still try to get somewhat of a commission off the sale. And I worked for a guy named Adam Tello, and he's actually, funny enough, he's a wine dude. Not a good guy. He was funny, and I don't fault him just because he was very much that football, still living in the glory days type of dude. There's always some drama between him and his wife, that would spill over into the shop, which was never fun. But he was the type of person where if I was talking to you making a sale, he would walk into the store, he'd be listening to the conversation for about 30 seconds, and then he would just take over the conversation because he thought that he could sell it better, which was very frustrating. It was a hard job to have, put so much time and effort into something to get to know. Like I knew those supplements inside and out. I knew how many grams of carbs and protein they had, and I knew exactly what companies they came from, and who I would recommend them to based on what. And, I was in the zone at the time, and so that was kind of weird and rough. But going back to what you're saying, the evolution of the industry, I think between when I first had that supplement job versus now, is that there's a big push for quality purely from more widespread education. It's like people are more educated now on average about what they want to be putting into their bodies and what's good for them and what's not so good for them. And obviously, we have a little bit more knowledge because of the industry that we're in and how we spend our free time researching. But, people want good quality products. More people are reaching for organic in the stores. More people are looking for third-party lab testing. It's becoming more of a common thing. So now, just being as a consumer and somebody who's, I guess we sell supplements, but not specifically those exclusively. But as a consumer, I'm seeing lots of quality increases, or at least claims to quality increases. A lot of companies that are claiming, we test this, we use organic ingredients, we are cold process, no harsh chemicals or anything like that. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you 100% for what you just shared. I think that, yes, people have the ability to get better information.
Right.
But I also feel that certain powers to be are also getting better at their lying game.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
becomes part of the biggest issue. And that's circles back to what we said earlier, is that sometimes as a trainer, you know, it's like, hey, this is what I want you to do. And many times, like, some of the suggestions we'll put out is like, hey, are you taking a multivitamin? Hey, are you taking, you know, protein or whey, or, you know, just speaking very, very generalized. And then we go, it's like, oh, no, I don't do that. And then you'll hear, in my opinion, once again, this is my confessionary, I hear a lot of things like, oh, I'm vegetarian, so we don't need to talk about this. Oh, I prescribe to this diet plan, so then we don't need to.
You know what's interesting about the companies and the marketing and how it's evolved is it was a very specific pattern that was happening over the past 2 or 3 decades, which it was getting flashier and flashier and flashier, big bright colors, all these crazy claims like 40% higher testosterone in 14 days or whatever it was.
Right.
And then there was a cut, like there's this split of these companies who go, no, we don't spend any money on marketing or flashy packaging or anything like that. We just sell you the simple stuff. It's real, it's simple, here you go. And that was great, because people were like, hell yeah, like they're not trying to sell me on anything. A good example is bulksupplements.com. It's like I'm seeing more and more ads for them. You order over 400 different supplements you can get, pure form, white bag, little logo on the bottle, or in the bag, and that's it, like super simple. And so it's very alluring, and you're seeing that in the cosmetic industry and the supplement industry, where they're saying like, we cut our prices down because we're not trying to be flashy. But is that in and of itself just a marketing tool?
I would even go so far to say, because I think with the onset of like Instagram and whatnot, they've revamped their type of marketing.
Right.
To me, what I see a lot of times nowadays is, we're in the age of the Instagram model.
Oh yeah.
And the Instagram model usually has some type of sponsor with X amount of, this type of brand energy drink, this type of weight loss supplement, so on and so forth.
Right.
Hell, you even see it in music videos nowadays, and without going into that.
Well, everyone's trying to make a buck.
True, but it's how they're going along making the buck, and it's the interpretation of how it's looking from the outside, looking towards it, right? So, I think one of the things for us, and I don't know if you agree with it, like I'd like to keep supplements in the supplement definition of the word. Right. Let's talk about food. Let's talk about what your whole homeostatic meal program looks like.
Right.
And if we see little holes in it, which is usually highly likely, then I'm going to suggest this to fill it.
See, I used to be very passionate about sports supplements, so protein powders, pre-workouts, creatine, testosterone boosters, all that stuff. Now I'm much more interested in terms of like taking supplements. I like to take botanicals or herbals or Ayurvedic, or however you want to classify them, because I feel like those are more targeted and specific towards a need. Like, if it's very unlikely, even if you are consuming a well-balanced diet, that you're consuming a significant amount of turmeric or cumin, unless you are of Indian descent and culture, and that's like kind of like a staple for you. So what if you're experiencing some type of physiological dysfunction that could be benefited from this compound, such as rheumatoid arthritis, you know what I mean? Like an inflammatory disease of the joints. And it's like, instead of taking a medication, there's a natural plant compound, which most medications are derived from in the first place, that is widely available, fairly cheap, and that you can take on a regular basis that makes you feel better. That's the stuff that's like really amazing to me. Not to say that sports supplements don't have their value, because they absolutely do, but I really love getting into those nitty-gritty details of the biochemistry of all these miracle plant compounds.
Yeah.
I really love it.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think some of the things that you just mentioned, it does require somebody with a deeper background like yourself to be able to even begin to suggest these things out. So that's one point I want to make, which more so people need to talk to this guy. Let me take a slight turn, because in a separate conversation we were talking about not ethnic eating, nutrition.
Ancestral eating.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kind of let's go on a deeper dive on that, because I know we share very similar thoughts on that.
So my philosophy has developed into what it is today from first of all, trying every diet that there is, right? Because I had digestive issues, and that was causing systemic problems in other areas of my body. Overall, I just didn't feel good, and so like I was trying, different diets to try to make that feel better. And I went through them all. I went through vegan, paleo, pescatarian, vegetarian. I did dairy-free, gluten-free. I did low lectin diet. I did keto. I did, anything that you could think of. I've probably tried it. Atkins. I tried it. And what I found out is that each diet in and of itself has merit. It has, some type of use or application, or maybe there's parts of it that are good. But what was a perplexing question to me at the time is like, I would see a diet, I would see all of these videos and read all of these articles of these people who had amazing success stories of disease remission and improved quality of life and build muscle and all this stuff. But then I would find stories of it not working. And I said, why? Why is this the case? Like, why is this working for some people and it's not working for others? Because for me at the time, none of those diets were working, right? So it's like, just very frustrating. Like, what am I doing wrong? And so I started looking at it. It's like, why is it that everyone has different reactions to food? And so that led me to research on the gut biome. And so then I followed that track, and that led me to the fact that, well, your gut biome is responsible for a lot of the health in your body. We know now you have an entirely newly researched nervous system, a third enteric nervous system, the gut-brain axis. We know that they regulate neurotransmitters, that they produce anti-inflammatory chemicals in the body, they help break down food, they prevent, pathogenic bacteria or viruses from getting in, a whole host of benefits. We co-evolved for millions of years with these bacteria to have a benefit for each other.
Yeah, we have a symbiotic relationship.
Right, exactly. And then I went down the path of, well, how does it develop? Where is it different? So it develops you get it from your mother when you're born. So I looked into the whole C-section thing because all these C-section kids were having health problems later down the line. Well, they weren't having a proper inoculation of their gut biome from their mother through the birth canal. Then I was looking at, what bacteria are in there? And it's like all these different species. It's like, they're different by region. You can change them by eating certain foods. And so it was just kind of this natural evolution of my knowledge. And basically what I came to is that, let's just say that humans have been around for about 300,000 years. Estimates vary, but about 300,000 years. We were mostly unchanged for that time. Let's say we were spreading out from Africa, starting to populate the different parts of the world. As we settled in those new places, the food sources changed, right? And so our body had to become more efficient in digesting and using whatever foods were there. Because plants are different. Plants have all these different compounds to protect themselves, natural insecticides, and we had to overcome those. And so the gut's evolving, the digestive enzymes in the body are evolving, they're getting acclimated to every region. Well, then there was this big shift, right? 10,000 years ago, 10 to 12,000 years ago, we created modern agriculture. That's when people really started to settle down, right? So then, instead of having a super adaptive digestive system and an immune system that would get used to wherever you were at the time, it became specialized, right? Because if you're eating the same food for several generations, your body goes, I'm going to specialize in this, and then I'll be even healthier than before because I can really get the most out of the nutrients that are available to me. So for about 9,500 years, we ate whatever was around us or whatever we could grow in that specific area. So very specific diet. So we became very good at that. Then modernization, actually, even longer, only 100 years, since 1900, were we able to do mass production. The Industrial Revolution, we were able to ship food products from different parts of the world everywhere, all over, refrigeration technology and all this, that was just absolutely changing the world. Well, there was an unintended consequence of that, is that we are eating foods that would not naturally be available to us.
Yes.
And even further than that, is that people are having children with people from radically different cultures. And so you can have somebody who has very conflicting gut bacteria because they have gut bacteria from the mother from one culture, but genetics that are programmed for different gut bacteria from their father, right? And so their blood chemistry and their gut bacteria don't line up, and they start having all these autoimmune problems. So the idea for me of ancestral eating is that your body has been evolving to eat certain foods based off of wherever you were from. Now granted, like I was saying, it's hard if you're a really mixed person, because now it's like, well, which area do I pick?
Right,
A little bit of all of them, or just, it's hard. And that happens to be the case for me. But if you can, I always recommend people, the most healthful diet, the place that I always start, is get a genetic test, see how or where you come from, how much of each, kind of ethnicity or culture that you have inside of you, and then start with the one that you have the most. So it's like if you're 46% Russian, it's like probably potatoes would be a better carbohydrate for you than rice. It's just because geographically speaking, that was what was available. So it is complicated. It's a lot of information to take in, and it's a conclusion that I came to over many, many, many years of research. But if I could boil everything that I just talked about down to a simple recommendation for people, and that would be that you should eat foods that are most closely related to what your ancestors, so your grandparents, your great-grandparents, so on and so forth. If you're a mixed person, I would highly recommend going and getting a DNA test so that you can kind of have a good starting point. And then if you're having autoimmune problems, more than likely what you're going to have to do is do an elimination diet. Everyone's different. Law of individuality, right? So we have the gut biome we were born with. It's changed over time based off of what foods we've eaten, and if it's at conflict with your immune system and the blood chemistry that you have going on, then you have to find a balance. The only way to do that is to get rid of everything and then slowly add it back in and see what sits well with you. It's a shitty process, but it's a result of our modern life of excess, right? We can go to the grocery store and buy any food we want, as much as we want, well, so far right now, but that's our situation right now, which is good. It's good that people aren't going hungry, but it presents long-term issues that we have to consider. How are we affecting our long-term health with what we're putting in our bodies?
Yeah. Well, I think there's also a bunch of other factors, especially now. You have the economic function of what's going on with, people's finances and whatnot. It's always been kind of a known fact that just between the U.S., we have enough food to end world hunger on, obviously on the global scale. We lack the infrastructure and the delivery methods in order to make that happen, without even going into the entire political game of where things start to go through. This, what you were kind of mentioning, reminds me of back in the 90s. I believe it was Dr. Shatani started coming up what was called there was a diet program called the Wine-Eye Diet. I'm not sure if you heard of this one. So basically it was looking at culturally related foods, or in this case since it was Hawaii, wine foods, and how is it relatable to improving your health. And Kamehameha was one of the first schools. Well, I can only speak from being a Kamehameha student, but they implemented this inside of our football camps. And so it was basically looking at foods. Now, since you were talking about more culturally related and ancestral foods, I think for Hawaiians it was interesting because of the class system. A lot of the foods that the upper class, the high-ranking class, ate, it was actually foods that were horrible for you. And part of it also was it was socially acceptable to be obese. Matter of fact, it was pretty. So it was no surprise that they tended to eat foods that were, high fat content. We're not even talking about like any portion managing or anything of that nature. But it turns out that the working class people had an excellent diet. High fruits and vegetables, high seafood, and when we're talking about culturals, like heart disease really wasn't a thing to Hawaiians. But then now fast forward it to U.S., now that demographic is one of the highest when it comes to cardiac diseases, blood. It usually never plays out well for the minority group that is now adopting Western. So I think it's parts of A and B of everything that you said, and these are just other monkey wrenches that get thrown into the mix. Which, for the record, that diet was amazing.
Well, so here's the crazy thing, is like the thing that people say is like, oh, the reason that we're having an unprecedented incidence of obesity is processed foods, right? Processed foods are cheap and available. But it's like, what is the true cost of a processed food? Well, let's look at the equipment. Like if you have a piece of organic fruit or vegetable, it's grown in land, you need the land, you need the tilling equipment, you need the harvesting equipment, you need a washer and a transporter, right? So there's a couple of pieces of equipment. If you're processing corn, because you're going to use it in some type of, corn starch, if there's corn syrup, whatever it is, you need all of that. Plus, you need the additional processing equipment to take it from its whole food product into this processed product. So that's extra cost, right? So then those companies process the product, they sell it to other companies to use in their products, and then they have to add a whole bunch of other products in to make whatever their individual, product is. So you kind of common sense, you think like, well, that sounds like it'd be way more expensive than just pulling the damn vegetable out of the ground and eating it, right? So where's the cost coming from? The truth is that a lot of it comes from subsidiaries, those companies getting government funding for crops like corn and soy. A lot of that funding comes from oil companies, because there's interconnected financial relations between oil companies and major food production companies like Monsanto and ExxonMobil. And I don't want to go too much into that, but the point that I'm trying to get at is like, now we know people who are in minority groups, people who are financially disadvantaged, are significantly more likely to have health problems like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. Why? Because they're consuming these processed foods because they're cheap. And it's like, yes, we could go into the political whole thing. The point that I'm trying to drive at here is that eating healthy actually isn't that expensive. They want you to believe that it is. They want people to believe, they want the general population to believe that eating expensive is difficult, it's expensive, and it's inconvenient, right? Because those three things alone by themselves are enough to motivate people to, or unmotivate them to eat the proper foods, right? So, and now we're having that wave of healthy convenience foods, right? Oh, we're healthy now. Like we don't use any artificial colors, or we don't use any artificial sweeteners, but there's still a ton of sugar. Or no high fructose corn syrup, but there's still a ton of sugar.
It's interesting you brought that up. Definitely during this pandemic, I've gone through financial ups and downs, and one thing I thought it was very interesting was, like, I had to go start eating at McDonald's again. I haven't done that in years, right? And then I download the app, you do the thing, you go wait outside, somebody brings out the food to you. I noticed that they didn't have any more of they used to have these really simple chicken wraps that I used to like. It was just like, baked chicken, some cheese, some lettuce, and whatnot. I used to get like 7 of them.
Right.
They didn't have that, and they also took off all their salads out of the menu.
Right.
So what I see now is actually they're going the old school route. Is like, oh no, we're just going to have a bunch of cheap food.
Right.
Just cheap stuff that you can get out quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even to your point when you're talking about mass production food earlier, you got to remember what's the goal?
Right.
To get a buttload of food out.
Right.
So when we talk about pulling out, a carrot out of the ground and eating it or something. The reality is it's like, no, there's a cycle. We need to get that carrot out of the ground because we need another load to start growing in very quickly.
And what's crazy is like, there's tons of videos you can look up on YouTube, and I highly recommend that everybody do this. It's like, if you want to budget your food and you want to you want to eat quality food, but you're like, oh, I can eat more of this food because it's cheaper. Well, take a look that there's tutorials on how to go to the grocery store and get a good sized grocery haul for really cheap. And I mean, like, you can get, if you're talking about protein, obviously chicken is cheaper than red meat and fish, and so you can get like a big thing of frozen chicken for, I don't know, like the last time I got
$17 chicken tenders.
Yeah, huge bag of them, right? I think it's like I think it's like 5 pounds or something like that.
Oh yeah, it'll last you a while.
Right, and then $20 for a 10-pound bag of rice. It's like, I don't know about you guys out there. I eat a lot of rice. It still takes me a while to get through a 10-pound bag. Right?
Yeah.
So there's that. There's bulk foods that you can do that will fill your stomach, give you protein, carbohydrates, fill some basic nutrient needs it's far better to eat more simply than it is to go for processed foods. That sucks. It's not as much variety. If you're really struggling financially, I feel for you, like I really do. But it's far better to just kind of deal with that than to deal with the health repercussions of indulging in those convenience foods like McDonald's or like whatever.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think that's very good starter advice for everybody, first and foremost. Because a lot of times when you start going through the process, you're like, oh, you know what? I could probably throw in some legumes instead of this, just for a little bit of variety.
Right.
And who says that maybe a small, like, few ounces of steak here and there, just to change up the mix?
Right.
It's not going to hurt you.
Not going to break the bank.
Right, you're not going to break the bank. But a lot of it is also learning the processes of what is appropriate to you, and then we start getting into like, oh, well, you know, I have more of emotional attachment to eating these type of foods.
So what I try to do is to prove my point to people is that, like, if I have a client, whoever says like, oh, I want to eat healthy but I can't afford it, I will take them on a shopping trip to Whole Foods, because Whole Foods is often perceived as a very, you know, high-end, high-quality, expensive place to shop. And it is easy to spend money there. You know, like I've done grocery hauls.
That is a lot cheaper though.
No. I've done grocery hauls where I'm like, you know, I was doing really well at the time, and I didn't care about money. Like I was just getting what I wanted, and for a week it was like $300 worth of food. So it's like very, very expensive. But you know, recently I've been able to go and I can take clients and give them a week's worth of food for $50. You know, that's not bad. That's not the best, but it's not bad, right? And so I think if you can't afford $50 a week worth of food, then you should probably be looking into like food stamps, you know, government help, because at that point you're definitely in need of it. But if you can afford 50,
or you haven't been prioritizing your food correctly,
right, exactly. It's like your expenses. What things are you spending money on that you probably do you smoke cigarettes? Those are fucking expensive. Do you buy
nutritional value whatsoever.
Do you buy lotto tickets? Are you are you paying for like a convenient parking spot just because you don't want to walk an extra 2 or 3 minutes down the street? Like there's a lot of things that you can do to save money. And do you have any subscriptions that you shouldn't be paying for? You know, that's part of eating healthy is like an investment in yourself, but it's one part of living a wholesome life. You got to balance everything out. Like, you can't just say like, yeah, I'm gonna eat healthy now, so only highest quality stuff. I spend $450 a week on, 100% vegan, cold pressed, humane avocado oil that is like, whatever, it's like the cure for cancer.
Right.
Or at least that's marketed like that.
Oh my gosh, do you know anybody that spends $450 a week on food? That would be mind blowing.
When I was bodybuilding and I was eating a lot, I was averaging about 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day, and I was working out twice a day, and I was just hammering it. At that point, I was spending about $400 a week on food, just purely through volume, right? Because of the amount of food that I was eating.
And that's a lot of truth. Not to what you call it. How much do you weigh about right now?
Right now, I'm a lot leaner since we've had the lockdown. I'm down about 25 pounds, so I'm 196, I think. And normally I'm about 220 to 225. I also am running more, but that's another thing. It's like
it also does it stretch out like what? You're 6'1", 6'2"?
Yeah.
So for the record, if you want to talk calories per whatnot, I'm about 5'10", 205 pounds at the moment.
Right.
I probably spend maybe about $100 every week and a half at Costco, and that's getting basics of eggs, chicken, those sorts. And I'm probably only doing about 3,500 calories a day. Yeah. So, when we're talking some of these numbers, you also have to keep in mind some of the things is goal related. My first and foremost goal to everybody, be healthy. So I think what we're sharing it right now is when we talk about like the $50 at Whole Foods.
Right.
We're just talking about trying to do a basic healthy diet. After us, since we're athletes, of course we're going to have higher requirements.
Right.
But we also have to look at it's not breaking the bank. And even your example of like 4,000 plus calories a day at $400 a week, that's not something that you can practically do at the moment. But you're still a healthy dude.
No. I lived at home at the time, and so like I was working, but it was just to pay for my food. Like I didn't actually have any other expenses, so that was why I was able to do that at the time. If Oh, I think I just killed it.
But this is still going.
Yeah, I think that, like, you need to be realistic about your situation. Like, if you're financially hurting right now, you're probably not going to be looking to do some massive bulk where you're putting on a bunch of weight because, you know, that's calories thing, and that then comes down to a cost thing. So it's like, can you do it? Well, take a look. Look at the numbers. See what you can do. But if not, then, you know, maybe say, okay, like, I'm going to choose this goal. Like, I want to increase my cardio, or I want to, you know, get down to this body fat percentage or whatever, or maybe I just want to feel good. Like, I just want to have a really healthy, balanced diet. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's no reason that you can't. You should always be adjusting to the situation, and I kind of try to apply the law of survivalism, I guess you could call it, to my life, which is like always be adjusting to the situation in front of you. So it's like, you know, if my leg gets chopped off tomorrow, is that an ideal situation? No. But am I going to stop that from me wanting to train for a 100-mile race? No. I just got to, you know, my training's going to be different. My diet has to be different. You know, I have to do certain things. My schedule is going to have to be different. So it's like you're always readjusting and reevaluating where you are in relation to your goal.
I like that, and I think I'm going to end this conversation on a note. What are the best ways for people to get a hold of you?
Best ways to get a hold of me are either through my email or Instagram. My Instagram is primal_nutritionist.
I just ordered you the other day.
Yeah, there you go. Or Garret Orien, if you look that up, then I'll pop up. Or you can reach me over at email, which would be gorien@hawaii.edu. That's GORIEN@hawaii.edu. I'm pretty good at emails. I check them every morning, so at the very latest, I'll respond within 24 hours. But yeah, I am always available for, at the very least, some helpful advice, if not some in-person consultation and coaching.
And for the record, people, I'll be having his bio up on the UFC Gym IG website, so please keep a look inside the coaches section for that. By the way, I took the liberty of taking some sexy shots of you off your IG profile.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
to finish up some of the
perfect
for the other stuff. So I just need a few other details on your qualifications and things like that, and then we'll be all set and posted on that. So, you know what, I was really looking forward to this conversation. I'm so glad this happened.
Yeah, absolutely, me too.
Considering like the depth of where we're going, I feel that maybe in like a month or two time, we can probably go in a deeper dive on a separate
yeah, absolutely.
podcast.
I'd love to. I'm a squirrel-brained as hell, so I'll try to stay as focused as possible.
So, but pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Bud.